The fluorescent lights in the industrial engineering department buzzed the same way they had since 2003, back when this building still smelled like fresh paint and optimism. Now it just smelled like toner cartridges and the faint metallic tang of machine oil drifting up from the fabrication floor below. I was Grace Dawson, senior systems architect, and I'd spent the last 19 years making sure this place didn't collapse under its own bureaucratic weight. It was a Thursday morning just after 8 and I was 3 spreadsheets deep into a production variance report when I heard the commotion outside my office. Raised voices, the kind that carry even through reinforced drywall. I recognized one immediately. Ethan Carter, VP of Operations. The other voice was younger, sharper, with that particular edge of entitlement that comes from never being told no. I didn't get up. Not my circus, not my monkeys. I had a deadline, and if Ethan wanted to parade his spawn around the engineering wing again, that was his problem. His son had been hanging around for the past 3 weeks, some kind of executive mentorship program that nobody asked for and everybody resented. The kid's name was Kyle, and he walked around like he owned stock options he hadn't earned yet. My office door swung open without a knock. That should have been my first warning. Ethan stood there, face red, jaw tight. Behind him, Kyle leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, looking smug in a way that made my teeth ache. The kid wore a tailored blazer over a graphic tee, the kind of outfit that screamed I'm too creative for your dress code. If you're new here and enjoying these powerful stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Let me know in the comments what part of today's story touched you most. Grace, we need to talk, Ethan said, his voice clipped and formal. Not the usual tone. We'd worked together for over a decade. He knew better than to barge in like this. I saved my document, closed my laptop halfway and folded my hands on the desk. What's going on? Kyle stepped forward before Ethan could answer. You embarrassed me in front of the entire integration team. I blinked. Took a breath. I'm sorry, what? Yesterday, Kyle continued, voice rising. You contradicted me during the stakeholder presentation. Made me look incompetent. The presentation had been a train wreck from the start. Kyle had waltzed in with a pitch deck full of buzzwords and zero substance, proposing we migrate our entire legacy CD system to some cloud-based platform he'd read about in a LinkedIn think piece. No transition plan, no risk assessment, no compatibility study. Just vibes and venture capital enthusiasm. I'd asked 3 questions. Simple ones. How do we handle offline redundancy? What's the data migration timeline? Have you reviewed our compliance requirements for aerospace contracts? He couldn't answer a single one. I didn't contradict you, I said evenly. I asked clarifying questions. That's standard procedure in a technical review. You made me look like I didn't know what I was talking about, Kyle shot back. Did you? The words came out before I could stop them. Ethan's expression darkened. Grace. I held up a hand. Look, I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. But if you're proposing a system overhaul that affects 17 departments and $40 million in active contracts, you need to have answers. That's not personal. That's the job. Kyle's face flushed. You talked down to me like I was some intern. You are an intern, I said. Or a mentee or whatever this program is called. You're learning. That's fine. But you don't get to walk into a room full of senior engineers and expect us to rubber stamp ideas that could sink the company. Ethan stepped between us, hands raised. Okay, let's all take a breath here. No, Kyle said, voice hard. She owes me an apology. I stared at him. Then at Ethan. Then back at Kyle. An apology, I repeated slowly. Yes. Kyle's arms were still crossed, chin tilted up. In front of the same people you embarrassed me in front of. Publicly. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just a quiet, crystalline clarity. I'm not apologizing for doing my job, I said. Ethan exhaled through his nose. Grace, come on. Just smooth this over. It's not a big deal. It is to me, Kyle interjected. She disrespected me. I asked you technical questions, I said flatly. If that feels like disrespect, maybe you're in the wrong field. The room went silent. Kyle's jaw worked like he was chewing on a response he couldn't quite spit out. Ethan's expression shifted from frustrated to something colder. More calculated. Grace, he said quietly. I'm asking you nicely. Apologize. Move on. We all have work to do. I looked at him for a long moment. Ethan Carter, the guy I'd helped dig out of a compliance nightmare in 2016 when the FAA auditors came sniffing around. The same guy who'd personally thanked me after I rebuilt the entire production scheduling algorithm in 72 hours during the supplier crisis of 2019. The guy who once told me I was the backbone of this department. Now he was asking me to apologize to his underqualified son for doing my job. No, I said. Ethan's face hardened. Excuse me. I said no. I'm not apologizing. Not to him, not to anyone. I didn't do anything wrong. Kyle let out a sharp laugh. Unbelievable. She's actually serious. Ethan's voice dropped an octave. Grace, I'm going to give you one more chance to reconsider. Or what? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Just stared at me with that same look I'd seen him use on vendors who tried to renegotiate contracts. Calculating. You're dismissed for the day, he said finally. Go home. Think about whether you want to be a team player or not. We'll reconvene tomorrow. I didn't move. You're sending me home because I won't apologize to your son? I'm sending you home because you're being insubordinate, Ethan corrected. And if you keep pushing, it's going to turn into something worse. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Kyle smirked behind him, clearly enjoying the show. I stood up slowly, grabbing my bag from under the desk. Didn't bother shutting down my computer. Didn't say another word. Just walked past both of them out the door and down the hallway. Behind me, I heard Kyle's voice, smug and satisfied. That went well. I didn't go home. I drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks away, ordered a black coffee I didn't drink, and sat in the corner booth staring at the scratch tabletop. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. But inside something had shifted. 19 years. 19 years of late nights, emergency fixes, skipped vacations, and solving problems nobody else could touch. I'd built half the systems that kept this company running. I'd trained dozens of engineers. I'd saved contracts, caught errors, prevented disasters. And now I was being threatened because I wouldn't apologize to some spoiled brat who didn't know a load-bearing system from a PowerPoint template. I pulled out my phone and opened my work email. Scrolled back through the last 6 months. Every project I'd led, every system I'd designed, every process I'd documented. Then I opened my personal archive, the one I kept on an encrypted drive at home. Backup files. License agreements. Contract addendums. I'd been careful. Always had been. When the company went through its restructuring in 2018, I'd made sure certain things stayed in my name. Consulting clauses. Intellectual property riders. The kinds of fine print that lawyers draft and executives sign without reading. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I was just taking inventory. By the time I finished my coffee, I had a plan. That night, I didn't sleep much. Just sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, going through every document, every contract, every piece of code I'd written under my own limited liability company. GDS Integrated Solutions. Registered in 2005, renewed every year, still active. Most people didn't bother with that kind of thing. They just worked, built systems, handed everything over to the company and assumed they'd be taken care of. I wasn't most people. When I'd started at Vanguard Dynamics, back when it was still a mid-sized aerospace contractor, I'd negotiated my terms carefully. Any proprietary systems I developed outside of core company resources remained under GDS licensing. The company had usage rights, sure, but ownership? That stayed with me. It was buried in an appendix. Clause 14C. Nobody had questioned it at the time because I was a nobody, just another mid-level engineer happy to have a job. But over the years that clause had quietly grown teeth. Every major system I'd built. Every automation script. Every database architecture. All of it fell under that umbrella. Including the production control system. The vendor validation network. The compliance audit framework. They didn't own any of it. They just had permission to use it. Permission I'd granted. Permission that, according to Clause 14C, could be revoked with 30 days written notice in the event of termination without cause. I leaned back in my chair staring at the screen. If they fired me tomorrow, if Ethan decided to make good on his threat, they wouldn't just lose an engineer. They'd lose the foundation. The next morning I got to the office at 7:30, same as always. My badge still worked. The security guard, old Martin with the lazy eye and the thermos of soup, nodded at me like nothing had changed. Morning, Grace. Morning, Martin. I took the elevator up to the third floor, walked down the hallway and stopped outside my office. The door was propped open. Inside, two men in IT polos were disconnecting my monitors. I stood in the doorway, keys still in my hand. What's going on? One of them looked up, startled. Oh, we were told to clear this space. By who? Ethan Carter's office. They said you were, transitioning out. Transitioning out. Corporate speak for fired. I stepped inside. My desk was already half empty. The files I'd kept in the cabinet were gone. My nameplate, the one I'd had since 2009, was sitting in a cardboard box on the floor. Where's my equipment? I asked. The IT guy shifted uncomfortably. Being inventoried. Standard offboarding procedure. I wasn't informed of any offboarding. Yeah, well. He didn't meet my eyes. That's above my pay grade. I didn't argue. Just set my bag down, pulled out my phone and took pictures. The empty desk. The disconnected monitors. The box with my name on it. Then I walked straight to Ethan's office. His assistant, a woman named Claire who'd always been kind to me, looked up with an expression that was equal parts pity and discomfort. Grace, I don't think. Is he in? Yes, but. I walked past her and opened the door without knocking. Ethan was on a call, standing by the window with his back to me. He turned, saw me and held up a finger. 1 minute. I didn't move. Just stood there, arms crossed, while he wrapped up whatever conversation he was having. Something about quarterly projections. Something that didn't matter. He ended the call, set his phone on the desk and looked at me with an expression that was somehow both tired and annoyed. Grace. My office is being cleared out, I said. Yes. Without notifying me. You were notified yesterday, Ethan said. I told you to go home and reconsider your position. You didn't. I didn't apologize to your son if that's what you mean. Exactly. He sat down, leaning back in his chair like this was all very reasonable. You were insubordinate. You refused a direct request. That's grounds for termination. I felt that cold clarity again. Sharp and clean. So I'm fired. You're being let go, yes. HR will reach out about severance and... Without cause, I interrupted. He paused. What? You're firing me without cause. I didn't violate any policy. I didn't fail to perform my duties. I refused to apologize for asking technical questions during a presentation. That's not insubordination. That's professionalism. Ethan's jaw tightened. I'm not arguing semantics with you, Grace. You should, I said quietly. Because in about 48 hours you're going to wish you had. He stared at me. Is that a threat? No. It's a fact. I turned and walked out before he could respond. Claire didn't look at me as I passed. I didn't stop at my office. Didn't grab the box with my nameplate. Just walked straight to the elevator, rode it down to the lobby and left. I sat in my car for a long time, engine off, hands on the steering wheel. Then I pulled out my phone and made 3 calls. The first was to my lawyer. A woman named Amelia Warren who specialized in employment and intellectual property law. I'd worked with her back during the 2018 restructure. She remembered me. Grace, it's been a while. What's going on? I told her. All of it. The presentation. Kyle. Ethan. The termination. She was quiet for a moment. Then, do you have documentation? Every email. Every contract. Every clause. Good. Send me everything. I'll review it tonight. The second call was to my accountant. A guy named Samuel who'd been handling my taxes and LLC filings for over a decade. Samuel, I need to activate the termination clause in my GDS contract. The one with Vanguard? Yes. He whistled low. You sure? That's going to be a mess. I'm sure. All right. I'll draft the notice. You need to send it certified registered mail. 30-day countdown starts the moment they sign for it. Do it today. The third call was to a former colleague. A guy named Peter who'd left Vanguard 3 years ago to work for a competitor. We'd stayed in touch. Holiday cards. Occasional lunch meetups. Grace. Long time. How's the old grind treating you? Not great, actually. I just got fired. Shit. Seriously? Yeah. Listen, you still looking for senior systems people? Always. You interested? Maybe. Let me send you my portfolio. We can talk. Absolutely. Hey, just so you know, we've been trying to poach Vanguard talent for years. If you've got insights on their production systems, that's extremely valuable. I smiled. I'll keep that in mind. By the time I got home, Amelia had already emailed me back. She'd reviewed the contracts. Her message was short and to the point. Grace, this is ironclad. If they terminated you without documented cause, they're in breach. And if Clause 14C applies to the systems you listed, they're about to have a very bad month. Call me tomorrow. We need to strategize. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my back porch and watched the sun go down. Somewhere across town, Ethan Carter was probably having dinner with his family. Kyle was probably bragging about how he'd gotten me fired. Neither of them had any idea what was coming. I didn't feel angry. Didn't feel vindictive. I just felt patient. The notice went out on Saturday. Certified mail, signature required. It arrived at Vanguard's main office on Monday morning. I knew because Samuel sent me a confirmation email with the tracking number and a scanned copy of the signature. Some kid in the mailroom had signed for it. Probably didn't even look at the contents. Just tossed it in the interoffice mail pile with all the other envelopes nobody reads. It would take a day, maybe two, for it to reach the right desk. Legal probably. Or maybe finance. Somebody who knew what GDS Integrated Solutions was. Somebody who'd actually read the original contract. I spent Monday morning updating my resume. Cleaned up my LinkedIn profile. Reached out to 3 recruiters I'd worked with in the past. By noon, I had 2 phone screens scheduled for later in the week. I wasn't worried about finding work. People like me don't stay unemployed for long. What I was curious about was how long it would take Vanguard to realize what they'd done. The answer came Tuesday afternoon. I was at the grocery store, standing in the cereal aisle trying to decide between 2 brands of granola that were essentially identical when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. Grace Dawson. There was a pause. Then a man's voice, tense and clipped. Ms. Dawson, this is Robert Finley from Vanguard Dynamics Legal Department. I set the granola boxes back on the shelf. Hello, Robert. We received a notice yesterday regarding termination of licensing agreements under GDS Integrated Solutions. I'm calling to clarify the scope of this action. It's pretty straightforward, I said. I was terminated without cause. Per Clause 14C of my original employment agreement, that triggers an automatic revocation of usage rights for any proprietary systems developed under my personal LLC. The notice provides 30 days for transition and knowledge transfer, after which access will be revoked. Another pause. Longer this time. Ms. Dawson, are you aware of how many systems fall under that designation? Yes. I built them. This is almost every operational system in the engineering division. Not almost, I corrected. It is every operational system. Production control, vendor validation, compliance tracking, automated reporting, quality assurance workflows. All of it. GDS systems, licensed to Vanguard under the 2005 agreement, renewed in 2018. I could hear papers rustling on his end. Frantic, disorganized rustling. Ms. Dawson, I don't think you understand the implications of. I understand perfectly, I said calmly. You fired me without cause. I'm exercising my contractual rights. If Vanguard wants to continue using those systems, we can negotiate a new licensing agreement. Otherwise, access terminates in 28 days. We can't just replace these systems in 28 days. That's not my problem. Ms. Dawson, please. Let's not be hasty. I'm sure we can resolve this amicably. I'm being extremely amicable, I said. I'm giving you 4 weeks' notice. That's more than you gave me. Can we schedule a meeting? You, me, and some of our senior leadership? We can discuss terms. I grabbed a box of granola at random and tossed it in my cart. Have your people call my lawyer. Amelia Warren at Stanton and Hughes. She'll coordinate. Miss Dawson. Have a good day, Robert. I hung up. In the parking lot, sitting in my car with a trunk full of groceries, I let myself smile. Just a little. 24 hours. That's how long it had taken them to panic. The meeting happened Thursday morning. Amelia drove us both to Vanguard's main office in her sleek black sedan, all business in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car payment. Remember, she said as we pulled into the parking garage. Let me do the talking. You're here as a technical resource. If they ask you a direct question, answer it. But don't volunteer anything. Don't apologize. Don't explain. Just facts. Got it? And Grace. She looked at me seriously. They're going to try to intimidate you. Make you feel like you're being unreasonable. Don't buy it. You hold every card in this room. We took the elevator up to the 5th floor where the executive conference rooms lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Leather chairs. A view of the city skyline that was supposed to make you feel small and impressed. Robert Finley met us in the lobby. Mid-50s, thinning hair, the kind of perpetually exhausted expression that comes from putting out fires for a living. He shook Amelia's hand, then mine. Thank you for coming, he said like we were doing him a favor. Of course, Amelia replied smoothly. He led us down a hallway to a conference room where 4 other people were already waiting. I recognized 2 of them. Ethan Carter, looking significantly less confident than the last time I'd seen him. And Susan Kalski, the CFO, a sharp woman in her early 60s who'd always treated me with professional respect. The other 2 I didn't know. A younger guy in a too-tight suit, probably another lawyer. And an older woman with steel gray hair and a tablet in front of her, taking notes before the meeting had even started. Ethan didn't look at me. Susan did and gave me a small nod. Acknowledgement maybe. Or apology. Hard to tell. Robert gestured to the empty seats. Please. Amelia and I sat. She pulled out a leather portfolio and a pen. I folded my hands on the table and waited. Robert started. Thank you all for making time on short notice. We're here to discuss the notice received from GDS Integrated Solutions regarding the termination of licensing agreements for several critical operational systems. Not several, Amelia interjected politely. 43 distinct systems. All currently in active use. The younger lawyer glanced at his notes, then at Robert. Is that accurate? Yes, Robert said tightly. Susan leaned forward. Grace, I'll be honest. We didn't realize the extent of your ownership structure. That's on us. But I think we can all agree that pulling these systems would be catastrophic. I'm not pulling anything, I said. The license is expiring. There's a difference. Semantics, Ethan muttered. Amelia's head turned slightly toward him. I'm sorry, did you have something to contribute? He met her gaze then looked away. Susan continued. What would it take to extend the license? We're prepared to negotiate in good faith. Amelia didn't miss a beat. Reinstatement of Ms. Dawson's employment, retroactive to the termination date. Full back pay. A formal apology. And a new licensing agreement with updated terms. That's not realistic, the younger lawyer said. Then enjoy rebuilding 43 systems in 3 weeks, Amelia replied. Silence. Susan looked at Ethan. This is your mess. You want to explain it. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. It was a personnel issue. Grace refused a reasonable request and I asked her to apologize to your son, Susan interrupted, voice hard. In public. For doing her job. That's not a personnel issue. That's nepotism and poor judgment. Ethan's face flushed. Kyle felt disrespected. Kyle is 24 years old and has no engineering background, Susan shot back. Grace has been with this company for 19 years. She's saved us millions in compliance fees alone. And you fired her because she asked your son technical questions he couldn't answer. The room went very quiet. Robert cleared his throat. I think what Susan is saying is that we may have acted prematurely. You think? I said. Amelia put a hand on my arm. A reminder. Susan turned to me. Grace, I owe you an apology. This should never have happened. Ethan acted without proper review and frankly without thinking. That's one way to put it, I said. What do you want? Susan asked directly. Not the legal terms. You personally. What would make this right? I looked at her. Then at Ethan, who was staring at the table like he wanted to melt into it. Then at the lawyers, both of whom looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I want recognition, I said quietly. Not a title. Not a plaque. I want people to understand what I built here. What I've contributed. I want to be treated like a professional, not someone's roadblock. Done, Susan said immediately. And I want Ethan's mentorship program shut down. Kyle doesn't belong in engineering meetings. He doesn't have the background, the training, or the temperament. Susan glanced at Ethan. Agreed. Ethan started to protest, then saw the look on Susan's face and closed his mouth. And, I added, I want a formal separation agreement. I'm not coming back. That got everyone's attention. Amelia didn't react, but I felt her shift slightly beside me. You don't want your job back? Robert asked, confused. No, I said. I don't. This place burned me out a long time ago. I stayed because I cared about the work. But after this, I shook my head. I'm done. You can buy out the licensing agreement. Fair market value, calculated by an independent auditor. I'll provide 60 days of knowledge transfer to whatever team you assign. After that, I'm out. Susan studied me for a long moment. You're serious? Completely. What will you do? I've got options, I said. And I did. Peter's company had already sent me an offer letter. It was sitting in my inbox, unread, waiting for this meeting to end. Susan sat back in her chair. All right. Let's talk numbers. The negotiation took 4 hours. Amelia was a barracuda. By the time we left, I had a buyout agreement worth 6 times what I'd been making annually, a consulting contract for the transition period, and a non-disclosure agreement that protected me as much as it protected them. I also had a letter of recommendation from Susan herself, written on the spot, glowing and detailed. Ethan signed the agreement without saying a word. As Amelia and I walked back to her car, she glanced over at me. You know, you could have asked for more. I know. Why didn't you? Because it was never about the money. She smiled. No. I suppose it wasn't. The transition period was strange. I came into the office 3 days a week, training a hastily assembled team of engineers on the systems I'd built. They were smart, eager, and completely overwhelmed. One of them, a younger woman named Casey, pulled me aside during a break. How did you keep track of all this? She asked, gesturing at the flowcharts and documentation I'd laid out. Practice, I said. And necessity. When you're the only one who understands how something works, you get very good at documentation. Did you always know you'd need it someday? I thought about that. Not consciously. But I guess part of me always knew that nothing lasts forever. So I built in safeguards. She nodded slowly. That's kind of brilliant. It's kind of paranoid, I corrected. But in this case it worked out. Ethan avoided me for the entire 60 days. I saw him once from a distance in the parking lot. He got into his car quickly, like he didn't want to risk an interaction. Kyle never showed his face again. Rumor had it he'd been reassigned to some vague marketing role in a different building. I didn't ask. Didn't care. On my last day, Susan walked me out personally. I meant what I said, she told me. This company owes you more than we ever acknowledged. You're acknowledging it now, I said. That's enough. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Short, sincere. Thank you, that felt genuine. If you ever need anything, she said, call me directly. I shook her hand. I will. I drove home that afternoon in silence. No radio. No podcast. Just the hum of the engine and the feeling of a chapter closing. The offer from Peter's company started the following Monday. Better pay, better title, fully remote. They wanted me to help them build a new production analytics system from the ground up. I said yes. 6 months later, I got a message from Casey, the young engineer I'd trained. Grace, I hope you're doing well. I wanted you to know that the systems are running smoothly. We've actually improved a few of the processes using the frameworks you built. You set us up for success. Thank you. I wrote back. That was always the goal. Good luck. Then I closed my laptop and looked out the window of my home office. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought about Ethan. About Kyle. About all the years I'd spent building something I thought was permanent. Nothing is permanent. Not jobs, not loyalty, not systems. But knowledge. That stays. The ability to build, to solve, to create. That goes with you. They didn't fire me. Not really. They just reminded me that I was never theirs to begin with. And in the end, that was the best thing they could have done. Because now I was free. A year later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Seattle when I got an email from an unfamiliar address. Subject line, Vanguard update. I almost deleted it. Then curiosity got the better of me. It was from Robert Finley, the lawyer. Grace, I hope this finds you well. I wanted to reach out with some news. Ethan Carter was let go last month. Performance issues officially. But between you and me, the board finally caught on to his favoritism problem. There were other incidents after yours. Nothing as dramatic but enough to build a pattern. Kyle left the company shortly after. Last I heard, he's trying to launch a startup. Some kind of consultant service. I wish him luck. Anyway, I thought you'd want to know. Your systems are still running, by the way. We've made some updates, but the core framework is all yours. It's still the backbone of this place. Take care. I read it twice. Then I closed the email and deleted it. I didn't need closure. Didn't need vindication. I already had what I wanted. A new job. New projects. New people who respected what I brought to the table. And a lesson I'd carry forever. Never build something you can't walk away from. Because in the end, the only thing you truly own is your ability to start over. And I'd started over just fine. 3 years after I left Vanguard, I was running my own consulting firm. Small, selective, focused on helping mid-sized companies build resilient operational systems. I had 6 employees, all handpicked, all brilliant. One of them was Casey. She'd reached out a year after I left, asking if I had any openings. I didn't at the time. But I kept her resume. When I did have an opening, she was the first person I called. We were in a meeting one afternoon planning a new project, when she asked me something I hadn't expected. Grace, did you ever regret it? Walking away from Vanguard. I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I said finally. Not even for a second. Why not? Because they taught me something important. They taught me that loyalty isn't enough. Competence isn't enough. You can be the best at what you do, and it still won't protect you if the wrong person decides you're expendable. That's kind of depressing, Casey said. Maybe, I admitted. But it's also liberating. Once you accept that, you stop building your life around other people's approval. You start building it around your own terms. She smiled. Is that what this is? Your terms. Exactly. We worked late that night refining a proposal for a new client. Around midnight, Casey stretched and yawned. I'm heading out. You should too. Soon, I said. He paused at the door. Hey, Grace. Yeah. Thanks. For giving me a shot. For teaching me. For all of it. You earned it, I said. I just opened the door. After she left, I sat alone in the office, the only light coming from my laptop screen. I thought about that day in Ethan's office. The anger. The humiliation. The cold realization that 19 years of work could be erased over a spoiled kid's bruised ego. It had hurt. I wouldn't pretend it hadn't. But it had also freed me. Forced me to see that I didn't need them. I never had. I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and locked the door behind me. Outside, the city was quiet. The air was cool. The stars were hidden behind clouds, but I knew they were there. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove home. No regrets. No bitterness. Just peace. And the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd built something that couldn't be taken from me. Not by Ethan. Not by Kyle. Not by anyone. Because the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something better. And walking away without looking back.